cybersecurity and cyber shields are the protections you build for your systems and for your future. I bolded 3 key things on the slide here that reference this. First of which is getting involved, meaning kind of expanding yourself beyond kind of your comfort zone, find those things you want to work on that are interesting to you. Find what's very interesting to you where you're finding your curiosities and build depth. And then of course, as we all are here to learn about how to make connections and be successful. I talk about this as kind of creating a 4 quadrants shield. You'll hear this in many different ways, how to kind of frame this discussion. I framed it like a shield because cybersecurity is kind of fun. So the thing I want you to think about as we talk today is as we go through my story and how my success was found, I want you to think about what would your shield look like today and what would you start building to make yourself find success as well. And we're going to talk about kind of some methodologies and how to think about it as well as we talk. But I just kind of have that in the back of your mind and we'll kind of go through this. Okay, so we're going to dive right in and kind of talk about my story as well for how I built my cyber shield and what that kind of looked like for me. So let's roll all the way back to 2019, right before the pandemic. Everybody likes to think about that time, before everything changed. I began my journey as a co-op, like many of you probably seen co-op positions that are in the industry and in and around the area. I started as an engineering IT co-op. It's actually kind of fun because this clicker says engineering IT on it because it came from there. But I came originally from Emerson Climate Technologies out of Sydney, Ohio. We'll talk about why the name change happened in a bit, but you'll see Emerson listed in the early days of my career, and there's a reason for that. We'll talk about that. But my core responsibilities were setting up computers, doing end-user support, like the occasional server maintenance, kind of the tier 1, tier 2 to some extent support level. So, kind of your entry-level supporting job. In those early time days, there were a few challenges that we were running into. First and foremost, take a look at the picture. Name the number of laptops. There's about 15 laptops at a given time we would receive per quarter, sometimes even as high as 30. And when you talk about engineering, well, I'm not an engineer. I do know they use pretty specialized software to do their job. So whether it's 3D CAD or they're doing analysis and simulation work, for us to be able to install this software required 8 to 10 specialized pieces of software per computer. The challenge was that there were so many manually installing steps to be able to step through this. So imagine me as a single co-op, I would have to go into a computer, sign into it, install the app, install the next one, multiply that by 8, by X number of laptops. It became quite unruly quite quickly. And so for us to try to make this faster and kind of support the users, because we worked on a 4-year cycle for laptops, as people with old laptops were end of life, we would get them a new one and so on. So the challenge I took on, how do we make that process more efficient with automation or at least some means to install software in bulk? That was kind of one of the first foray things that I started looking at beyond just kind of what my job responsibilities said. So turning that challenge into an opportunity looked something like this. So this was actually a picture. I'm actually surprised I took this and I found it and put it on the slide, but I'm glad I did because it kind of frames out what this looks like. So to be clear, prior to my co-op term, there was no means of installing software unattended is the technical term. Otherwise, typing it in and hitting go and letting it run. How many pieces of software that we had? There had been no automated means of doing this. Was this an opportunity? That was the question I asked myself. At this point in my career, I had little to no experience in scripting or any type of real automation. So it was something that I really wanted to try to find my footing and try to learn, can I make this something a little bit better for us? So after a few months of a lot of Google searching and research, you'll see this is just the first rendition of the installation script. It's a little hard to see, yes, but what you're seeing here is a list of different softwares that we had, and over time, I was building up how I can install them automatically. You select a list, select from the list, hit enter, go, and it would install automatically for any number of these. So that was the first run through automation. It was simple, yet it had a real use case, and it let me kind of find my footing, so to speak, in kind of working through automation. What I didn't realize was that this was beginning to set a foundation for myself later. So let's take it further. So a new challenge arose. So at this point as a co-op, I had really no experience with kind of the broader scope of what my department did and what my department really managed. There was this thing called Team Center. I was like, what is a Team Center? Seriously. I had no idea what it was. And probably I would wager most of you probably don't know what it is either. So we're going to talk about that very briefly, kind of what this meant for me. So our servers were having server instability. We needed some means to monitor and alert based on cases where things would fall and deviate. So we found our department found a tool called App Dynamics, which was something that allowed us to scan and alert and monitor and so on. But hold on, let's pause. What is a Team Center? What is PLM? And what is App Dynamics? Because I'm going to just throw out these words and nobody really probably knows what they are. So let's do a quick little discussion. Everybody has a phone, right? Everybody has a phone that they use. If you've ever really sat down and thought about what goes in the engineering of one of these phones, the screen, the cameras, the circuit board inside, the processor, there is some merit to every single component of it, putting together into some kind of assembly. And then what you would have to do is have some means of discussing change, the design, the work between people. And what I'm describing is the life cycle of your product. So if you were Android or if you were Apple wanting to create a phone, obviously it's not one person doing it, it's not small teams, there's a lot of people that go into that. For you to manage the data and the processes of doing all that, you need a central repository not only for that data, but for the change processes that happen for it. Thus enter an app like Team Center. There's many like this is the one that Copeland uses. It's a product lifecycle management software. So for us to support the 2,600 people that make compression, refrigeration, and all that, it's a pretty vital piece of software for the organization. Because without it, how do we make a product? How do we manage the product? So if the server's having instability, that's a real problem. So quite quickly, you're kind of seeing why it's important in the narrative for it. There's a lot more to it that I'm not going to touch on because it's not the point of the talk today, but I just want to briefly mention that. So after asking all those questions, I fast forwarded a few months because a lot of research, a lot of discussion, a lot of meetings turned into something like this. So curiosity that I had for PLM, what the heck is it, what does it do, turned into, okay, more installation tools to make it more efficient. To this date, we have no means of installing Team Center automatically. So using my experience with automation that I put together with the automation script, I made a graphical interface installer that never existed, and the provider of Team Center, Siemens, doesn't do it either. Also using App Dynamics to make automated reports and charts that do some of this stuff. So, tracking like database calls and whatnot. And then sending notifications when things start to deviate or things start to go down. So this is both analytic based, so we can see when things are starting to deviate before a crash, and also if something does crash. So that was just from an initial curiosity. I was like, what is that thing? Oh boy. Because I dove in head first, not realizing at first what I was diving into. What I didn't realize was that I was already getting involved and building one of my core sections of my Cyber Shield. That's where this depth of expertise section comes from, because this depth of expertise in PLM and Team Center and this type of very specific niche that I'm describing to you was something that I wager a lot of you probably hadn't really thought about. I didn't either. I didn't know how important this was, but it makes sense. You need to be able to track product and all that, what it means. And obviously there's IT infrastructure to support it, and security and all that, same thing. I wish I realized this sooner. We're going to talk about why I'm saying that here as we keep going. But those challenges also lead to growth, as we kind of already mentioned a little bit. Those challenges lead to many opportunities, many things of growth, and the challenge is you have to find those, or more accurately, you need to identify when it's happening. Because often you'll kind of retroactively look back and say, wait, I learned a bunch there. But you don't notice it in the moment because you're just kind of working, right? So it's important to find that. So I was hired. So I was co-op for 2 terms, and then the pandemic hit. There was some time there where I was a contractor because of finance reasons. But then I was hired as a direct head, and my title was Team Center Developer. Now, developer in the sense of, hey, I know how to build automation to some extent. I've had some experience, but I was very new to it, to be honest with you. But nevertheless, I was able to find my footing enough to start building a breadth. And note the word breadth, I'll use that quite a few times. And I learned some things like project management, requirements gathering, data migration, system architecture. I can keep going. I don't think you want to hear the laundry list of things that they have me do every day. But it is interesting because this was, well, again, I didn't realize it was also building that expertise that I didn't realize at the time. But there was a niche building that was specific enough that I was finding real success already, even this early in my career. keep in mind, this is pre-Franklin. I wasn't in Franklin at this time. I had graduated from a community college. Now, Franklin supported me huge during this kind of transitionary phase, but we're just not quite there yet in the timeline. Thus, that's when it comes up, right? The next big question actually then was, should I go back to school? I just got a full-time job. I just finished my community college. We just came back from the pandemic. And my manager was instrumental in talking to me about, would it be a good idea for me to go back to school? Well, his way of putting it was, it would help to cement my position long-term and remove any doubt. That's a nice way of saying, kind of get around the risk of not having the four-year degree and maybe being blocked by, other people that haven't, right? So there was a lot of different discussions that happened, both with transfer specialist, my manager, and after a while, I did finally decide to go back to school and enroll for a fall semester at Franklin. And then this happened. So then they asked me, hey, would you like to go to this conference in Las Vegas for the industry conference that we go to annually? It's made by Siemens, that's the people who make Team Center, and it's called Realize Live. Now, picture me as somebody who grew up in small town Ohio, never really being in big city. I've been in Columbus a couple times prior to that, Dayton, a little more because I'm closer to Dayton, but being asked, hey, jump on a plane, which I've never done before, go to Las Vegas, and go network with industry peers. Oh boy, talk about a culture shock. That was something I had never done before, had no idea what I was doing, and if I even belonged there. But what we're going to learn is, I certainly did, I just didn't realize it. And it took me a couple years to really realize that. So, the question was, do I belong there? Well, first off, here, take some pictures, right? So this was the conference floor. If you've ever seen CES or any of the other big tech conferences, it looks pretty similar. But the interesting thing, it's hard to read, but there are groups and people here like aerospace and defense. There are big companies like NVIDIA, Microsoft, Salesforce, all these big companies here. I'm the little guy. What am I doing here? I just graduated not too long ago, and I'm just into my career, the first years of my career. And I'm in this big thing with all these big names, oh boy. So, they have all these big things, and they were in the Mandalay Bay. So if you've ever even looked at a picture of Las Vegas, Mandalay is like a 4-mile range in one building. It's huge. It's kind of crazy. And then they have the big main stage events every day where they have all the big industry peers come and talk about how much they're innovating the industry and all that. And again, I'm like, wide-eyed trying to figure out, why am I here? So I did get some takeaways nonetheless, and keep note of these because these do roll back into the narrative here in a bit. I learned the different software solutions and PLM, again, that very specific niche, how the industry is revolutionizing and pushing forward, finding new solutions to problems. This was right before the AI boom, although AI obviously has been part of the discussion for a while. And I met a few people, but I couldn't shake that nagging feeling like I didn't belong there. Nonetheless, I didn't realize it, but I want to point out, this still was part of my cyber shield at the time, just the first days of it, really. I was going to an industry conference, connecting with professionals and peers, but the story obviously doesn't end there. So this is where the turning point happens, because it went from shell shock to actually finding success. And I think the best times to find success are in times of change, and you have to be ready to dive in head first. So that's really where I'm going with the next part of this discussion. So let's recap briefly. So I just started as a co-op in 2019. I won't mention the pandemic, but it happened in there. Was hired full-time in 2021. I enrolled at Franklin in 2022. I went to the conference in 2022. And then Emerson announced they were selling the climate technology business. I'm sorry, what? So that's how I reacted to it. I'm like, what does that mean? Do I still have a job? Do I still have a reason to be here? Does this completely change everything? Well, yes, it does. But in that change, I found much success. So there was this huge transaction with Blackstone and all these big things. Big money, big names, big dollars over my head. To be honest, I had to figure out, in my little IT tech niche, what do I do with that? How do I respond to it? The sale meant everything was changing, right? So, as a brief history, Emerson acquired Copeland, which is a 100-year-old company, I think in the 90s, something like that. Don't quote me on that, I don't remember the date. But it was rebranded as Emerson Climate Technologies, and then upon the divestiture, they were going back to the Copeland name, which is good because it's a well-known name. But that also meant for us in IT, hey, all IT infrastructure, it needs to go to the Azure cloud, Microsoft Azure cloud. And we were also having to rebrand everything to say Copeland. Why are we doing that? I'll talk about that briefly if I have time at the end. So the question here was, could AI help? That was right as the AI boom was starting. But I want to focus on this one quite a bit. We have to transition this specific platform of technology, which again isn't ours, we don't own it, although we do extend and use it, that's provided from a third party, and move it to the cloud, and you have 6 months to do it. So, okay, 6 months once the tenant's up. We had about a year to plan, so I have to be a little more specific. We had to start early to find success. So how the heck do you do this, right? We had to learn a lot fast. We had to learn how to access, deploy the cloud. We knew nothing about the cloud. We had our own private on-prem infrastructure we used. We largely didn't even touch the building of servers. We just said, we need this with this spec, and they made it, and they gave us the server connection details. So how do we architect this very specialized monolithic application? Again, we're talking a very specific niche, not a lot of things people think about, never mind use every day, or I have IT infrastructure. Who do we work with to do this? Do we have to figure it out truthfully all of ourselves? And then I realized that next conference was coming around the corner. So 2022, I was sent to the conference. I had no idea what I was doing there. 2023, there was a little bit more of a focus this time, as you're kind of seeing. The question was, how do we move our IT infrastructure to Azure, right? A good plan is the only way you can even approach this type of problem. So that was why I went there. I mean, that was the main focus that I had there. So I leveraged the industry. I should say we leveraged the industry because it wasn't just me, it was our whole department. But, you know, with finding those connections that we could make, I mentioned already that there was the big names at the conference, NVIDIA, SAP, Salesforce. I bolted Microsoft. We're going to their cloud, so maybe Microsoft would be good to talk to. Okay, well then what about this specific tech niche? So again, 2023 was a lot of planning, so we weren't doing any transition work yet, but once it was up, we had, you know, a window to do it in. And I bolded the last section. We leveraged former company connections and drafted and built new ones to help us craft our blueprint for success. On the right of the screen, this is made by somebody who, believe it or not, worked for Copeland for a year, went to go work for Microsoft after he was previously a Siemens employee. Very specific individual. He was the one who was building up what the baseline architecture for this exact piece of software looks like on Microsoft's cloud. So we were given access to this architecture ahead of its official release. So they gave us the first look at how to even do this prior to it being formally posted on their Learn article. If anybody wants to look it up, it is available online. And you can see all the technical minutiae, what that screen means. I don't need to talk about it too much right now, but that was a great find. Wouldn't have happened without connections and networking, right? And we're only going to build on that from here. So this is a Copeland slide, but I do think it's worth mentioning what this was actually entailed. So we had 6 months, we had a 6-month goal, I should say, to bring our footprint to Azure. So obviously organized preparing and planning was key. So just a quick footprint of what this is. We have 2,600 users globally using our system every day. We have 20 plus years of history in the system, actually it's about 8 terabytes of data now, over 10 production servers. That's a lot of stuff to move, never mind the connections between systems that we have across the domain. So we need a pretty sophisticated plan. I'm not going to read every box there, but every step was key, and then we ran through it a couple times to test it, dry run, right? And the thing I want to focus on is building a living run book. What that means is you're building up your step-by-step, I mean every single waking step that you do to successfully do this, and run through it. Test it, make sure it works, do it again, make sure you're good and ready to go. When it's prime time, you actually can do it for real, and then you execute. So this was a complete cutover activity where we took all of our stuff from on-prem and moved it to the cloud in 36 hours. We had automated testing to help us do some of this. We had people manually testing as well, and we did network tracing and all that to find the connectivity and find any gaps that may exist. And there were a couple, but we worked through them quickly because we planned for it. Okay, so that turbulence of change that I just mentioned was a pretty key part of my cyber shield, right? Cloud architecture. I never would have expected this, for one, and two, in those times of big change, that's where you find the best opportunities. And it doesn't have to be your company is sold or you've lost your job. Change can be anything, but it's important to identify when those opportunities arise and take advantage of it, because that's how you go from, honestly, a fish in the pond to being a standout individual. And not only that, with all the stuff I just mentioned, first year, I went to the conference, kind of had no idea why. Second year, I had a little more of a focus. That third year, they wanted us to present that success. So,
nice.
The transition for 3 years was absolutely surreal to experience real time. We presented not only at that same conference, we presented alongside that Microsoft employee that we worked with to help do all this. So, talked about a success story, and talk about one that I would have never seen coming a mile away. I was still somewhat shell-shocked even doing this. Still can't believe I did it. But, you know, this is where if you find opportunities, when you start shooting off the rocket, how high does it fly, right? The important part is to actually recognize that and keep riding it. Don't fall off of it. Obviously, know your limits. Don't spread yourself too thin. But those are the turbulence of change and some of the things that can help you. What counts as change? Not just, again, not just a company being sold, but your expertise, you getting a degree, any number of things can be constituted as change. So, again, that's what it turned into for us. Meanwhile, I was in school, right? Let's not forget that. So I haven't talked about it very much yet, but it's been the kind of the undertone for this entire thing, because for me to even do that and sit in front of you and present today is I had a supporting net that really helped to support that transition. And this is what I want to kind of transition to kind of start making you guys really think. For the students that are in the room right now, this is a very important point in your career. You may be thinking, for some of you may not be in a job. This is important for your career too. You got to recognize that though. So, the turbulence of change meant I was very, very busy. But I still had the goal, right? I wanted to get my bachelor's in cybersecurity. I'll talk about why I chose cybersecurity in a minute. But the flexibility here at Franklin made it so I could continue my school and build breadth while I was building depth in a section, right? So here's a couple ways to put this. Breadth builds your foundation, depth builds value, right? The chart on the right is a great way of describing this. Having a broad awareness of a topic or a foundation, let's just say IT, right? IT is a strong foundation. But to truly succeed, you need to have a depth of knowledge in a specific area, AKA you're an expert, right? And you won't build it overnight. You won't build that maybe in 3 or 5 years. I don't call myself an expert. There's no reason to, because that's not the point. I'm continuing to learn. I want to build on that. I want to learn new things. But as you continue to build on it, you begin to start standing out from the crowd. That's the important message I want to give you guys, because that's really what you're looking for. And then let's talk about why I chose cybersecurity. That breadth versus depth discussion is why I chose cybersecurity in the first place. I knew, not right away, but I knew after a couple of years, I was building a very, very specific niche in this team-centered PLM thing, which again, I don't expect most of you to work in that field, but that's not the point. The point is knowing that you're in a niche or finding that niche you want to work on. It may be more specific, that may be, cybersecurity SOC analyst or something like that, right? But if you find that specific section and niche you want to work on, then the important thing is to have a strong foundation, right? If you build on that foundation, then you have the support to succeed in that expertise. It just so happens, Franklin's cybersecurity curriculum brushed on nearly every IT topic. Maybe it didn't go to a lot of depth, but it had a lot of breadth, right? So, system administration, web development, cloud, database, so on. It talks about all of them. And I used all of them. I didn't know it, that I would use all of them, but I did. Cybersecurity, of course, is important for everybody. It is just growing more important. So, yeah, that's kind of where cybersecurity landed for me, plus it's just kind of fun anyway. And then, of course, Franklin got me involved, right? So, I need that strong foundation. Everybody needs that strong foundation to succeed. There is just doing your coursework, finding success there. But then there is doing those extracurricular things and finding new ways to find success, sometimes even faster. So for me, in cybersecurity, I participated in this National Cyber League thing. What is that? In fact, I saw it on a green book. I was like, what's this cyber competition thing? I asked a question. I managed to connect to Dr. Denise Bergstrom here at Franklin. She's the cybersecurity chair. And she told me, hey, we have this cybersecurity competition that's coming up. Not Franklin, but there's a national one that Franklin participates in. And you should participate. Okay, why not? Well, that was a whole other story. So then after that, I joined the ACM club. I eventually became the president of the cybersecurity club. I went through the cyber competition a couple of times, and very quickly, apparently, I got really good at it. It was a shock to me to know I could even do this. They put me through red teaming, hack into the thing, or blue teaming, respond to the event. Later, through an election that went through with the official ACM processes, I was elected the chair of our president of the cybersecurity club, or the ACM club, and president of the cybersecurity special interest group. Whirlwind of change for me. A lot of responsibilities. I'm talking to you as an alumni, and I still chair it because it's just so much fun to help engage students and build them up, because I found my success. Why not give back to the community, right? That's why we're here. And then, of course, Franklin's support led me to graduation. June 1st of this year, I graduated with summa cum laude, which is highest honors. Ooh. And that was purely because of the support of the staff and faculty and the flexibility they afforded me, because quite frankly, I couldn't have done it without that flexibility, that support, because I was going through a bunch, as we've talked about, right? So that's really where this kind of story leads. So, pretty self-cut and dry. It would have been possible without that support. So, now, let's talk about what you just heard is my story. I've talked about the story narrative for me. Let's briefly brush on, okay, so for you, because you're going to have a different story than mine. You're never going to see two different stories that are exactly the same. It's very rare, and oftentimes, because every person's different, their whole journey and story is different. The key is finding those ways to find your own success and build your network, because you're going to find it in a different place than I did. My specific tech niche was kind of just dropped in my lap in a way, honestly, because I didn't know what it was, and then I was like having to figure it out, because that just happened to be where I worked. I didn't choose to go into the PLM space, though I did, and it afforded me quite a bit. You'll find that same thing too if you look for it. So let's just briefly talk about IT, because that's why we're here. I've drawn a very, very cartoon diagram of a pie chart, okay? You can cut this any number of ways in IT, and everybody will probably call it a little bit differently. I've cut it in this certain way. So core areas of IT, IT services support, enterprise systems, cybersecurity, DevOps, cloud, data analytics. You've heard all these terms before. It's just a matter of how do you approach this. So the key is to find a foundation. So early days, and this is where you're at kind of now if you're in school, build your foundation, right? You need to build understanding of all these skills. It doesn't mean you have to go be an expert in any one of them. You just need to know about them and know kind of generally how they work. Then, as you build up that foundation, then you start singling out one that's interesting to you. You will only be the only person that can tell you what's interesting to you. So, select a category you're more interested in. Again, you can cut this any number of ways. So, my way of describing the slide isn't necessarily the de facto way by any stretch. But you select a category, can't be more than one, just be mindful, don't spread yourself too thin, because remember, you're trying to become an expert. And then, what you do then is you cut that pie even further, that slice. So I've just zoomed in on cloud and platform, right? Build your expertise across, again, one or multiple of these key focus areas. If you've heard of cloud and looked at it before, you've probably heard a couple of these terms before. High availability, serverless resources, cloud architecture. If these terms don't make sense to you, that's great. Be curious, look into those, because that's really where you'll find your success and build your, and it may not even be cloud, right? It could just be one of those or a different one that I don't have listed. The important message here is find the one that's interesting to you. And then get involved. That's the important message. That's been the undertone of my entire presentation. There's a reason for that. You need to make yourself stand out, because think of it like you're a fish swimming in a pond, or maybe a big ocean is a better way of putting it. IT is a very hot field. Everybody knows that, right? IT is growing. It's actually exploding in how big it is. You have to get involved, and you have to go above and beyond your coursework to find success. It's a great way to start, but then you got to find your curiosities and build on that to find expertise. Again, everybody's is different. You will not find the same, you will find success, but you won't find the same path I took. That's the important message. And then you need to network, right? Networking like a technologist. You need to come into it as deliberate as possible because, again, just use the tools as they exist to stand out from the crowd. If you don't have one already and you're an IT major, step to LinkedIn. You need one. I won't explain all of why, but you're going to hear that quite a bit. Then that LinkedIn will help to build context around who you are and what you do. Even if you're a student, share your interests. Put on what your skills you're learning are. You know, find a time to post a little write-up about, I just learned this important thing. People look for that. They look for the curiosities. They look for the expertise. They look for the actual intentional messaging that I, as an IT student, was very interested. And then if you do something like an NCL or equivalent, because there's like data analytics and cloud competitions too, find those, and quite frankly, I'm going to use the word, brag about it. Really? It's really what you're doing. You're marketing yourself for success. And if you use LinkedIn to do that, it's just a great networking tool to do that. But I want to highlight, don't just blindly network either. Don't just start sending connection requests to people that look like, you know, big names that will look at you. They won't care, quite frankly. But what I will recommend is after a positive interaction with somebody, it could be a 5-minute hallway talk. It could be me in a presentation like this. It could be any number of things. After you just have a conversation with somebody, that same day, a little while later, send them a connection request on LinkedIn. Maybe describe who you are and thank them for having the conversation. What that follow-up does is it helps to show fast engagement. It helps to cement that interaction with you. And they may not think about you every day, but it's just enough to have that record in their minds that you were somebody they wanted to talk to.
Can I add something else to that?
Sure.
I think that's a great point, but to take that one step further, you know, why don't you make a post, you know, about that interaction, you know, with the speaker or with the person that you met in the hallway and you had a conversation with them, and then make a post on LinkedIn that you learned this from them and it was really interesting for you and you benefited from it. And then, you know, all those posts in your LinkedIn profile are going to build your professional character over there. So just consider this next time when you are in a professional networking event.
Yes, and it also builds credibility too, because you didn't just drop in one day and be an expert, right? And if somebody really is trying to find somebody in a field, they want to find that timeline of events. How did I first learn about this? How did I build on it? How did I find my expertise? They're not just looking at you in a piece of time, point in time. They want to see the whole story. Not everybody will, but for those who truthfully care about finding the expert in the field, that's where you'll find a lot of success. So thank you, Dr. Neiman.
Sure.
So I asked at the top of the session, how would you build your cyber shield? Again, it's not just cybersecurity, although it could be part of it. You need to self-assess where you are today. Even if you're brand new to this, that's great. Now you know that, right? Now you know where you are on the map, and now you kind of know where you want to go. Again, your story and your path is different. What quadrants on this are strong, which are weak, what can you build on, right? Build on what you're interested in. That's an important thing you've got to really watch. And again, I've been saying it the whole time. Build off your interests, because if you're not interested in something, you won't have fun doing it. Your career doesn't have to be that time slog, I have to go and work 9 to 5. You want to find fun, right? Everybody who enjoys their job doesn't work a day in their life. There's a reason for that. Find that. Find the place that supports you, find the supporting net, find the career that's interesting to you. Take action now. Try to note down, think about it today. Note what quadrants you're strongest, what's your weakest, how would you build to something more successful? And it doesn't need to be perfect either. It should just be a start. It helps you build forward. So, with that, I'll leave you with that message. You don't wait to be chosen, you choose to build. That's the message that I think would be very beneficial to you as you go forward. And if you're just new in your student career, or it's your 3rd or 4th year, it doesn't change it. You choose to build your career and what you want to be. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Wow.
practice networking like technologies right now. Send me a connection request, say you were here today, and maybe, like Dr. Neiman said, share about what you got from this session. I'd love to hear about it, and I know that your future industry career path would love to hear about it too. So again, take what you learned from this and walk with it. But I've got time here for some questions. So,
Yes.
Any questions from anybody in the room?
Well, that was an amazing success story, Jacob. So thank you for being here and for sharing that story with us, with all of us here. Please use his time and his expertise here to ask any questions or if there's anything that you want to explore further. This is your time.
Okay, first let me introduce myself.
Sure.
My name is Rezi. I am a student at Franklin University. I study computer science. I'm very excited being here, meeting you in person.
Yeah.
And thank you for giving information about cybersecurity, which is new for me.
You're welcome.
What I want to know is, okay, I heard about that you face challenging during the transition from university to your new career path. I would like to know any specific advice for you based on your experience.
When you fall down, and you will, IT is very much in that way too, right? You will fall down and you'll find a stumble. The thing is, right, and there's this kind of preconceived notion in the industry that people have that if you screw up, that's it, you're done. You have no more path. That's not how they react. Okay, if they do react that way, it's not somewhere you want to work anyway. But the key there though is how do you respond to your own failure? Do you own up to it? Do you try to hide it? Don't try to hide it. They'll find out anyway, and then it will look bad. If you say, man, I messed up. Here's what happened. Here's what I'm going to do about it. That's something that I didn't employ initially. I wasn't like I was hiding problems, but I came to it where I'm like, oh my goodness, I messed up. I broke something. And you will break things in IT. Let me make that clear. If you don't, you're not doing IT right. But if you break something, don't be like me and shocked and stuck and be like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. No. Tell them, this is what I'm going to do about it. I had a great supporting net to make sure that I didn't feel like I was going to have recommendation for what happened. Not everybody's career path, not every organization is the same, but the message is the same, right? How do you respond to it? I just so happened to have a manager who's like, it wasn't a big deal. Just do this and it will happen again. That's my message. If you have a problem and you have a spot where you fall down, pick yourself back up, dust yourself off, and think about how you won't trip again in that same way. And then be ready for the next one, because it will happen again, and it will happen again. And that's how you learn, right? You don't find success in just never failing. You find success and you build on your previous failures. That's something that you have to remember. There was a service running on an app at work once. It was a pretty important one. It did data migration from one system to another, and if it wasn't running, data wasn't landing in a database that we needed it to run in. It was down one day because I was running an update. I forgot to turn it back on. Something so simple. Right-click start. Well, I forgot to do it. And I was like, oh no. My manager was like, all we have to do, turn it back on, run this tool to update it and fix it. No one's the miser. And it wasn't like we were hiding it. It just, we have a tool to fix it. Okay. But I didn't know that, so I was terrified that I screwed up. The important message again, I'm going to say it one more time. Own up to it, and then say, how can I fix it in the future? So hopefully that helps. Okay. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Petrila. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
I
you.
have a two-point question.
Sure.
Were you always in IT, or did you always know you had to do IT? Did you have to pivot at all?
I have a weird story. So I started as, I did completely online school, K through 12, completely. You've probably heard about Ohio Virtual Academy. There's other ones that were similar to it. I was an online student my whole life. I was around computers my whole life. I was interested in them. Few key moments that really stood out for me, but I was generally always interested in IT. There was a couple times I almost went into like engineering manufacturing, but I didn't. too much math for me. So. But I was kind of interested in IT the whole time. I just didn't know what part of IT because I didn't know, again, the depth idea. So.
And, well, I guess to answer this question, you'd have to rely on people you've met before. What advice, if any, would you have for a person who didn't always know they wanted to do IT and is now like switching over, they're starting a new journey?
I mean, you have to recognize where you are, right? So if you maybe didn't start, I mean, I have a specific story. I was building up from kind of knowing I wanted to do IT from an early age, but everybody's the same. But it doesn't change the story though. You start from somewhere, right? So my advice would be, again, going back to what I said before, know where you are, know where you want to be, and then the goal then is to try to find those, from getting the value out of an event like these, or finding the connection in the peers. It could be other students who have more IT experience just from their prior knowledge. It could be community events you go to. There's all kinds around this town. And you can do just small things to show, I'm interested. And then just start marketing yourself as somebody who's very curious about something like IT, because it's less about how much experience, it's how curious you are, because no matter what, you'll go into some IT field, you'll learn a ton of stuff anyway, no matter if you've been in it for 20 years or not, right? It is literally just being curious and finding that way to problem solve your way through a problem, because you'll run into those things you don't know. You can't drop into something and expect to know 100% of it, it's impossible. So that's kind of my advice, is try to know where you are, be curious, and show that you are indeed curious about that, and share your milestones, right? Every step of the way is a milestone. This is a milestone, being here, right? Like Dr. Nemeth said, take advantage of that. And if you have further questions, I'm sure many of us, including myself, wouldn't mind to answer some and help out, because it's why we're here for an event like this.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Thank you very much for this lovely presentation. My name is Khalid, and I'm transiting from like business student to this analytics. So my question is that what point should I be able to select that niche that you mentioned in your presentation? Because for many years I've been in a different field, and now transiting to that computer and IT things. So what do you think that, this is my first semester, so how long should I take to analyze the things and then go for that particular niche point?
The answer I'm going to give you may not be exactly what you're looking for, but the truth is only you can really know that, right? If you're building your own foundation, you'll know when you know it's stable enough to start digging in and getting deeper in something. So if you're interested in analytics and databases, that's great. So, okay, maybe at least be curious about what is the infrastructure that supports my database? How do I keep the data secure? How do I deploy it? Basic stuff like that, and play around with those spaces. If you're aware of those things and you've at least touched on it, I would say that's a great starting foundation. And you may, it's not just, baseline, you build one vertical, right? You will build all of them over time. One should be just a standout expertise, or one or two or three maybe at most, is kind of the way I think about it. But for your specific case, I would say you're early on in your exploration in data analytics. I would say, timeline-wise, I can't give a timeline. But once you get through, some of the core ideas and kind of the pie chart I showed, just enough, start digging your heels in and start really exploring it, because that's when you'll find that success. So the answer is, I don't have a timeline. The timeline's different for everybody. But if you dig your heels in enough to build that breadth, then you can find that depth. So does that help?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, Jacob.
Sure.
Yeah, I have a question. We see you here in person first time. Yeah, but I'm Dr. John Lee. I teach at Franklin. Here you'll see you have some new students here. You mentioned something very interesting. Actually, you are learning by doing something.
Yes.
You are very curious. You'll find out some pain point. Well, in the industry on the automate, this is the first step, right? Because you did something continuing based on the learning by doing. My question is, many new students here, they do not have that industry job position. What's your suggestion for them to learn something by doing something here? What would be your suggestion?
Well, the first thing I would obviously mention is there's a reason why co-ops are so important, right? You learn by doing. That's the important thing in anything, especially IT. So look for the opportunities for a co-op position in the field that you're interested in, or at least adjacent to, and you can build off that. But failing that, or if you don't have the ability to get to a job right now, there are all kinds of resources online you can reference and leverage. If you're, let's just say you're interested in cloud, right? There are free credits provided to you as a student as being Franklin, first off. But second, there are learning paths, learning guides where you can actually sit down, solve a problem. If nothing else, come up with a small problem, small, start, that you want to solve yourself, okay? I'll give a really weird example. My parents are piano technicians. They work on pianos every day, okay? They need a way to track their data for customers. Instead of going to buy an off-the-shelf product, would it be nice if they had like an app or something to just keep track of stuff? Okay, well, I just touched on 3 things. We need to have database to track stuff, an app, and you have somewhere to deploy it, right? Very simple idea. It's not very complicated. It's just a few text fields and maybe a way to take a picture and save it somewhere. If you find a small problem that is real world to you, and it will be different, that's some way you can really find a solution. I haven't made that app yet. I haven't had time, but I've wanted to make it. And that's just an example of something like that. Everybody here had something at some point. It'd be nice if this did that. And if it's small enough, maybe spend the extra few hours a night or whenever as you have time. How would you do it? Even if you don't solve it, if you don't do it, at least explore how you could do it. It gets you enough of a nudge to explore it. I'm a bad example, but I've sat and watched hour-long things about building websites. Do I build websites? Doesn't sound like it. But I'm just being curious, right? Be curious about what's interesting about it. And so that's kind of, in a way, kind of my adjacent advice. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you mentioned something he cares.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important. Find something interesting to do and do something, start from small.
Yeah.
Right, okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Jacob, I have a question.
Sure.
My name is Joy.
Mhm.
I'm an entrepreneur after 50 years of tech executive.
Mhm.
So I love to hear the stories of young generation. So
Thank you.
my question is, what's your opinion about the pie shape of the talent? You mentioned the T, right?
Mhm.
There is a breadth of the knowledge as foundation, but also there's a depth of the domain knowledge.
Right.
That's a T shape.
Yeah.
Now there's another way saying, actually there's also another way, pie shape,
Yeah.
right? There are 2 depth of the knowledge of domain.
Yep.
Everybody define the other depth different ways.
Yes.
What do you think?
My honest answer is there's 100 ways to skin a cat, right? So you can approach this type of problem in any way. This just happens to be the way I most resonate with, understand the breadth versus depth problem. But in truth, I cut a pie up with all different IT ideas. There's more, there's a different way to do it completely. My thought is, find what resonates with you as a way to find your career path and your path to success. Because what I said here doesn't need to apply to everybody, it won't. But finding what's applicable to you is the key. So if the pie idea and something like that is more applicable to kind of how you think in your mind, great, use that. The point of the message is to find your guiding star. If you find that guiding star, then you'll have that path to success. So, does that answer your question?
I think I was also maybe thinking like the real question that probably applicable for the students here is, how much do you think that the soft skills you have contributed to your
Yes.
success in the highly technical industry?
Yeah, so soft skills are huge, and
We don't call them soft skills anymore. We call them core skills.
core skills.
What
Sure.
was that?
We don't call them soft skills anymore. We call them core skills. Core,
Okay,
yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those core skills that you build off of, again, you learn by doing, right? A while back in this deck, let me see if I can find it quickly. When I was talking about my early days in school and in my career, let's see, it was before this. Yeah, it was on my hired slide. So, right here. I mentioned leading projects, right? Now, do you think me as an introvert, having been in online school and not interacting with people in brick and mortar settings very much could lead a project? Never mind a big multi-million-dollar supporting project. No, and I wasn't, not at first. But if you can find that supporting net in either your career or mock examples, right, for soft skills, leverage them, right? A communications class is important, right? I'm standing in front of you presenting. I wouldn't have been able to do this even 3 or 4 years ago, or maybe even 2, right? Because I didn't know how to talk to a crowd, right? I didn't know how to do this. And then there's writing, there's technical writing. In IT, there's a lot of writing involved, unfortunately. You have to write technical documentation and information about how to solve a problem, how to do something. Those are all core skills to support and build your success. And you learn by doing, and nothing else. Try to find those ways to do it. It's the same story, right, as, you know, specific IT niche. Find your depth in that area too, and learn how to, you know, build technical documentation, how to present, how to run a meeting. You know, things like that are all important. There's no one right way to do it, but there are hundreds of examples. If you want to go watch some of the big executives present, just take note of how they approach, how they solve problems. And if you get the chance, ask questions of people who may have more experience. Like there was a meeting not that long ago where somebody was very careful in their messaging because they didn't want to find any way, even attempt to find offense to anybody. They weren't trying to. They were just running a problem-solving meeting. But I was like, he's approaching it very, very strategically to make it so even in this urgent, oh my goodness problem that there was, how do we actionable, find plans? How do we make it so everybody's, you know, comfortable knowing that we all need to find a solution? Communications is huge in that. Being able to identify how do you properly convey yourself. How do you also not come across as somebody who is too big for the britches maybe, but also just build and find that success, because interaction is everything, and if you make one wrong interaction or the wrong first interaction, people remember that. So keep note of that as well, but also understand that you're building always. So again, if you trip and stumble, pick yourself back up, try again, right? You can't give up because you messed up once. I get in my own head. If had I done that better, had I done that? That's a terrible mindset. Yes, understand you could do better, but don't get stuck in that loop, because I've found myself doing that. So that's kind of how I would think about kind of the core skills idea of the pie as well. So thank you for the question. One more.
Yes. Excuse me.
You're good.
My name is Lawrence. I'm also in transition right now. I work in IT. Decided to come back to school.
Yep.
I'm right now enrolled in master's degree in computer science. My question to you is, during your career, there was a time you had to learn really fast.
Yes.
Right. This was when you had to move to the cloud. You had 6 months to learn about the cloud.
Yep.
And deploy it. I'm curious, what approach did you take to learn very fast? You know, and also for students, someone might be asking themselves, you know, there are a lot of certifications you can choose. Now, for example, someone wants to get certification in cloud engineering or something.
Right.
There's so many options there. You can choose AWS, Azure. Maybe because you were working, it was easy for you to choose maybe, for example, Azure because you wanted to deploy to it.
Right.
Now, walk us through how you pick the right certification to, you know, start diving into.
Well, I'll start by stating that I didn't get a certification before we went to the cloud. I had to learn fast, and I had to learn by doing and getting dirty with it, quite frankly. But the message is the same, right? You need to sit down and kind of survey the space, know what you need to do, and then build off of that. So for my specific case, I had to learn fast, and my way of learning fast probably isn't the best way, and maybe not the healthiest over time, but you know, hard work does get results if you know where to put the hard work. A lot of late hours researching things, I won't lie, but again, everybody learns their own way. So whether it's hard, fast, bunch of research, watching YouTube on loop overnight, not overnight, I promise, but watching videos or reading documentation or, you know, connecting with the right people, it was kind of a blend of all three. You know, researching how do I, you know, what is it? Watching how do I do it, and then connecting with, okay, now how do I do it with my specific focus, right? That connection I made back at the conference was so vital to our success. Without it, could we have figured it out? Maybe. but we didn't have to stress ourselves over those specific details. We had to more so figure out how do I create a VM? How do I set it up? How do I install the right apps? How do I connect things so they talk to each other? Once you start finding, you have to kind of, write yourself a checklist. What do I need to know to solve this problem? And you may not even know all the items on the list yet, but give yourself kind of a waypoint of where you're at and then start filling in the boxes. And how you do that is different for everybody, but there are so many resources online, and you have to find out, you have to identify how you learn best, right? So if you learn best by doing, great. Leverage some of the free resources that exist. Learn how do I log into Microsoft Azure or AWS? How do I create something? Just to get yourself familiar with it. Then, okay, how do I create a VM and not just something else? Do that. How do I secure it? There are all kinds of expertise fields, and then the certification paths are a little more focused in some areas. We need to learn kind of a broad spectrum, which is why I didn't get a cert yet. I have Cloud Essentials Plus now, but at the time I didn't. So I kind of just got dirty with it, quite frankly. Dug in my heels, then just was like, where do I need to go with this? How do I need to build it? And I started, for lack of a better word, clicking my way through it to figure out what are all the buttons, what are all the fields that say, then researching what all those meant, and then going from there and repeating that process. That's how I learned. I'm not sure if that's conducive for everybody, but that's at least a methodology. And then obviously there are ways you can say, AI now exists. So if you have a very specific problem, don't rely on it just to give you the goal. Get you in the, my philosophy on using AI for that type of problem too is get yourself in the ball field and then dig in and build around there. And that's how I kind of do it. So it's like, I need to deploy development resources in the cloud to support our developers with the code. Okay, that's a little more specific. How do I do that? It's like, hey, there's a whole thing that is designed to do this. I'm like, I didn't know that. I could have spent hours researching it, or at least get in the ballpark, then explore that niche. There's some ideas there how do I do it. I don't know if I'm rambling more than answer your question or not, but does that help a little bit?
It does. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, everyone, we're over time, so thank you so much for your time. I'll stay around for a little bit afterwards if you have any follow-up for me.
Well, this has been a great discussion, and we want to be respectful of our speakers' time. So if you want to continue the, conversation and connection with him, so he's available on LinkedIn. But before everybody goes out, how many of you are Franklin students? How many of you, the Franklin students, are members of ACM Club?